Welcome, everyone. My name is Frank Gambino, and we are very excited to be presenting Beyond Compliance, Navigating the New Regulatory Reality. Um, I'm going to go ahead and kick off and just go over some housekeeping items with everyone. So first and foremost, yes, yet again, thank you for joining us. We are really excited to be presenting this session today, and I'm joined by two experts who I'll be introducing momentarily. Before we begin, just a few comments. So questions, of course, welcomed and encouraged. Submit them as you think of them. We're going to try and hold off until the end of the presentation to answer them. But of course, if there's something that comes in that needs more immediate attention, we'll of course answer that as they come in. To submit questions, feel free to use the Q&A button or the chat to interact with our team. And then a recording of today's session will be made available after we conclude today. And then just as a quick note, as we present, any reference to rates, cost, marketing strategies is not reflective of a specific offer made by any of the speakers on today's session. So just keep that in mind as we continue. So we've got a really awesome panel of experts, and I'm not just talking about myself. So I want to introduce Scott Stouffer, who is the Senior Product Manager of our mobile line here at Transflow, and Steve Kepler, who's a co-director at Scopolitis Transportation Consulting. Guys, why don't you introduce yourselves?
I'm Scott. He's Steve.
That's me.
I know we all have a very similar barber today, so it's hard to distinguish.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. And just to run through a few of what we'll be covering today. So we've got some really exciting updates regarding the English language proficiency. I know that's top of mind for a lot of people. So that's going to be front and center as we kick off. But we're also talking about ELD fraud, some of the updates from the FMCSA, really why these updates matter and how fleets can protect themselves, not just with some of the fraud, but also log hygiene, updates to DataQ, and where we see problems arising in this new regulatory environment and what is expected to come very shortly. So let's kick off. I'm going to turn this over to Scott Stouffer, who's going to talk through some of the updates to this English language proficiency. Scott, we've been seeing this for quite some time, industry panels, I remember seeing this back at TCA maybe about 18 months ago being covered. So what have you got for us today?
Yeah, so this is an ongoing topic, and I was in the room when we voted on this when the executive order was signed. But it's been ongoing. There's been some contention around it, but there is an update. So the FMCSA posted a notice of proposed rulemaking last Monday, and the intent of this is what their intent is to codify a violation of the ELP as an out of service condition. So essentially, the intent is to take what was put into the out of service criteria that is owned and maintained by CVSA, and take it from them as an operational policy and make it into a federal regulation. So that's the intent of this. So it essentially, in the future, if it's revisited or reviewed, it's not really in CVSA's hands anymore. It's in federal regulation to maintain it as an out of service condition. So that's going in, and then, or that's what they're proposing, and then secondly, to also clarify the southern border zone exemption, which is essentially if you're coming from Mexico into the southern border or operating only in the southern border region, and you fail the ELP, you can be given a violation, but you won't be put out of service. Whereas if you're intending to leave the southern border zone or coming in from the U.S. into the border zone, then you can both be given a violation and be put out of service. So that's out there. It is posted. It's open for comment. So if anybody on here wants to discuss or make comment, please do while it's out there.
Now, and again, this has been kind of talked about quite a bit over the I want to say last few years, more so in the last year or so. Do we feel like the major impacts of this would be felt immediately, or do we think that this might be staggered in as this gets codified?
This won't change anything that's happened. All it's doing is it's more of a long-term play. So it's making it so that going forward, it won't be something that can easily be changed. It's in effect, as it stands today, CVSA is already enforcing this, and it's exactly what they're enforcing today. So all this does is it ensures that it's there for the long term. It's much easier to change out of service condition in the out of service criteria than it is to change a rule. So to change this now would require a whole new rulemaking process. So this is more about sustaining that out of service condition.
Yeah, historically, Frank, the CVSA manages and maintains the out of service criteria. They've done that for many years. But to Scott's point, there are a few items that are actually in rule with that specify an out of service condition. There's only a handful of them. This would be in addition to that.
Yeah.
Awesome insight. Awesome. Okay. I know this is definitely a hot button issue, and I expect many questions to come in. So as you guys think of them, feel free to use the Q&A in the chat. While we jump over to the next, because I know this next topic has been something that has been facing a lot of people. And Scott, I know you've already kind of coined a new term for this, so to speak.
Yes. Don't take my thunder, but yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah. So
no, please
and
go
this,
for it.
No, so this is and I want to talk about ELD fraud, but it's one component of a bigger fraud issue. We've seen it's been highlighted. We see FMCSA has really ramped up enforcement of several different fraud issues within the trucking industry. Community carriers have gotten a highlight. CDL mills, they've been going after those as well. We have non-domicile CDLs that they're going after. And then this is one other component to it. So when you look at all those together, that's where the term dark trucking comes from, because you kind of, once you put it together, you almost have this whole sub industry that's just built around fraud and conducting illegal activity. And so I know everybody's seen a lot of the ELDs being revoked. That is part of going after the fraud and on the ELD side of things, because there was a whole section around that's happening in the ELD business where we have a series of bad actors that are basically developing electronic ELDs to explicitly go out and commit fraud, enabling the community carriers, enabling the drivers with the fake licenses and so forth. So that's become a big thing. And this is something we kind of only really started seeing for about came to light in about the last 2 years. Matter of fact, it came through driver traffic at CVSA. And since that time, it's kind of just gone down the rabbit hole. It seems to have gone deeper and wider, and more has been done to look into this. And it's way broader of an issue than we realized it was only 2 years ago. And so now the FMCSA has started ramping up their activities.
I noticed, I remember our conversation, I believe it was at TCA as well, that there was discussions about, at the time, them forecasting how many providers may be put out of service as a result of kind of not being compliant with some of the telematics and ELD hours of service, and the way that they've been circumventing some of the standards and practices as well. So I know this has been something I think that's been talked about quite a bit.
Yes.
Again, I kind of come back to the impact is, what if you're a carrier and you're using one of these ELDs, and even if you're going through it correctly, can you speak a little bit about some of the impacts that people might expect to see?
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I will say that these devices are generally being used in the service or are being provided for people to use them fraudulently. But there have been drivers that got caught off guard when all of a sudden their logs changed and they weren't expecting it. So yeah, not everybody's using one is committing fraud. So to that point, right now, let me give you some numbers to put in perspective. In Canada, they have about 180 ELDs because they have third-party certification. In the U.S., to kind of give you the disparity, before 2025, there was, depending on what day it was, I think they got up to 1,300 ELDs were registered and self-certified. So that's a big disparity between what Canada's showing with third-party certification versus 1,300 in the U.S. And yes, we have a bigger market, but that doesn't account for that that large of a disparity. And so that is a huge number that they're trying to clean up. And then if we flash forward to 2026, to put in perspective of some of the actions that have been happening is since the first this year, through a new vetting process that the FMCSA has put in place, they have stopped what I think, as the last numbers I've heard, was roughly 500 ELDs that were non-compliant from reaching the market. That is a lot of ELDs that are trying to be certified and are being found non-compliant. And then the second half of that is revocations. And for the record, to revoke a certified ELD is much harder because of the way the regulations are written than it is to stop them from being registered. Since first of the year, we got 56 ELDs that have been revoked. And I think between the last 2 years, the entire total was 97. So we're more than half of what was done the year before. And that's increasing at a pretty decent clip. And to put in perspective, we went from at some point during the last few years at 1,300 ELDs, and we're down to 940, which is a big number still, but we are finally starting to make some headway on this. And we expect a whole lot more to get hit with this. And this is all part of, again, that enforcement effort that's going on. And as I mentioned, on the certification piece, they've put some new active vetting process in place. And also to note, there has not been a change to the regulations. Like the process for registering or revoking hasn't changed since 2015. That's something that's supposed to come soon. It's the FMCSA has got more active in how they're looking at the ELDs, how they're confirming that they are compliant, working within the existing regulations. And then on the other side of it, for the revocations, between FMCSA, CVSA, working with the inspectors, they've increased awareness within the inspection community. They have increased and enhanced training on this. It's being talked about quite a bit. And what that is doing now is it's allowing the inspectors to go out, look at the logs, understand what they're looking at, identify them, and get them into the FMCSA to start the investigations quicker, so that they can help speed along the investigation and revocation process. And so that's kind of what's going on, and that is a big piece of why we're starting to see what it seems like it's 10 ELDs, 12 ELDs every month or so now. But these are the things that are happening because of the size and scope of this issue. And then again, as part of addressing this back in, I guess it was April last year or fall last year, there was a new out of service condition put into the out of service criteria, specifically to address false logs that were the result of tampering or data manipulation. And the logs can't be deciphered. So essentially at this point, they're so bad that there's no way to say that they're actually valid or not. And so in these cases, the driver will be put out of service immediately.
And that's a really, well, I don't want to say a good segue. Nothing good about that at all. But it is a segue into the enforcement piece, which is our next section. So let's try to jump into that enforcement aspect and what we're seeing from the FMCSA as a whole. Yeah,
and this is kind of what I was mentioning, and I kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but yeah. So again, these are the ELDs that they've been blocked, and that is, again, that started around January 1st of this year when they enacted this. It was either December or January, and again, that's the front line, and that the big part of that is it's stemming the bleeding, right? There's still 940 out there, but we're not having new ones go into the registry. And a big part of it is some of them are new ELDs, and a lot of them are ELDs that have been revoked. They basically go out and reskin themselves, and then they go resubmit. And so that is where what that is doing. And then on the revocation side is, again, we have inspectors out there. They know what they're looking at now. They understand where the fraudulent logs, what they look like. In some cases, some of them are really messy, but they have a better understanding of what to look for. You have a more tech savvy inspector now, and that's where the 56 is coming from, and we expect that to increase. So that's kind of what's going on the two sides of that, and that's until we get the NPRM, which we're expecting to get that hopefully in November. It was supposed to have gone in July, but we'll see.
Right. And so I think a lot of our attendees on today's session are they hear this and we kind of look at this, and this is the kind of like the so what, right? So
Oh yeah.
as we see this, why this matters to a lot of our carrier partners and reputable carriers in the industry.
Yeah.
I think
And
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, Steve. Yeah.
Sorry, Scott. I'm interrupt you. I
Yeah.
think the one thing I'll mention that I think is important to this conversation too is the FMCSA administrator has indicated that he wants to get rid of self-certification and move to a
Yes.
third-party certification, like Scott mentioned, is going on in Canada. So there's a lot of interest and support, I think, by a lot of industry to move in this direction as well. That certainly, if that comes to fruition, that'll certainly change the market for sure.
Yeah, big time. And by the way, I'm glad you brought up, and I got to acknowledge that since Derek's been in, that's part of why we've seen the acceleration in the fraud enforcement and the ramp up in the numbers is he's come in and he's really going after it. So I've got to acknowledge Chief Bars for that. But yes, so yes, to your point, why it matters, because this is the thing is I'm if you're on a transfer or geotab ELD, obviously one of the top ELDs, but I have no doubt that everybody that's on here today is with one of the reputable ELDs, right? I don't expect anybody here is dealing with one of these. So the question is, why does it matter? Well, because while this is happening, it's impacting the industry, right? It has real world day-to-day impacts. There's obviously the safety risk, which is when we're not talking about shaving 15 minutes here or abusing PC there. We're talking about a system where drivers are masking hours and hours of driving hundreds of miles. I mean, there was one instance we looked at in driver traffic where the driver was driving south to north, when in reality, all his logs said he was going east to west. I mean, it's to that point, right? So the danger that drivers in this condition pose is exponentially greater than, I'm misusing PC or whatever. This is set up to be an issue, and it's a safety issue to your family, your kids, to other drivers on the road. So there is the immediate safety risk attached to it. And then there's the business side of things, right? As we're coming out of the freight recession, freight rates are coming up, but there's been a lot of discussion that they're probably not ideal, while at the same time operational costs are skyrocketing. And so there's a huge disparity, and this type of fraud and the use of devices that allow drivers to take loads and run way past their limits is going to impact and keep freight low. And it's also part of the reason why insurance rates are going up, right? So that's impacting that. And there's one other thing I want to bring up to everybody that's on here, and I think everybody should be aware of this. And I mentioned there was an out-of-service condition added to the out-of-service criteria for this. We talked very heavily about this during the session when we were voting on the language. And the key was we wanted to make sure that it didn't become a catch-all for any time that logs look bad. And I think they did a good job of putting that together. But the one thing I do want to say is, for everybody that's on here, there's drivers out there. You have your drivers. You might not keep track of your logs. You have inspectors now that are scrutinizing every log looking for fraudulent ELDs. It's been set up so that it wouldn't be a catch-all. There are criteria that they have to meet. There's a lot better training, but everybody should understand that just like we back in 17, 18, and 19 during the original roll of the ELD, people got stopped and got cited for stuff that wasn't actually a violation, right? The concern will be if you're not keeping track of your logs, you have edits all over the place. You got suggestions out there. Your UIDs aren't cleaned up. You got PC problems. You're basically log hygiene. You're putting yourself in a situation where you come across the wrong inspector, or he doesn't know what he's looking at, or they're just so ugly that you get put out of service for it because you're not keeping track of your logs. So when you have the type of scrutiny, I can't stress enough. I don't expect it to happen often. I don't expect it to be a real thing on a regular basis, but now's the time when there's that type of scrutiny to go ahead and start keeping track of your logs, putting your policies, make sure your policies are in place, make sure the drivers are doing what they're doing, and keeping track of your UIDs, using your tools. so that you don't potentially get caught up in mistaken fraudulent log investigation.
That's a really good point too. And I think we've heard, whispers and murmurs about it kind of getting a little bit more aggressive to your point before about inspectors coming in and really taking this very, very seriously. And to that point, sometimes it's not even a true error per se, but it is good to keep very hygienic records for that exact reason.
Yes, 100%. Yes. So again, that's the data, you have the impact to the industry, but you also have the potential impact to your day-to-day that can come out of this.
The only thing I'll add to that too is the scrutiny is not just at roadside, but also during compliance investigations.
Yeah.
So that's another thing to be careful about.
Absolutely. This is a good segue as well. I mean, we're talking about kind of keeping processes up to date. And so there's also been updates to DataQ process. So Scott, I know this is a bit of a switch gears moment. Let's take it from here.
Yeah, I'll try. I want to just kind of run through this, but if you happen to get caught up in by mistake and you get a violation for fraudulent ELD, there is an improved way of handling it through DataQ. So there's going to be there's a new process going to roll out next month. It's supposed to be introduced. Basically, it's a revamp of the DataQ's review process. The biggest change is really it's going to be 3 levels of review. You'll go through a first review, and there's timelines now set for 21 days. You get evaluated, and a third party that's outside of the inspecting officer has to be involved. So you have an impartial reviewer. Then you have if for some reason they decide to not change the violation or change your data, they will have to give you a reason why, which has been a big issue in the past. Of it's just a black hole. We think you're wrong. That's it. So they have to give you a reason. You can go through a second review, and 21 days you'll have to give cause as to there's new evidence or you have new reasons why it should be reviewed. And worst case scenario, again, you'll get your information as to why. And if need be, there's a final review where they'll bring in subject matter experts to review it along with I think MCSAP. And the biggest one is, a lot of this came out of the industry complaining that state to state it was inconsistent. So to try and get the states on board, they've tied this process to the MCSAP funding. So hopefully that's going to get the states involved in it. But overall, it's a good first step compared to where we were, and the idea that, well, why do I even do it? Because they're just going to tell me I'm wrong. To now actually having a process that we have timelines around, and we have some transparency.
And also as part of that, they're going to have to publish their plans of how they
true. Yes.
Handle it. So
yeah, every one of the MCSAP representatives are required to send them in. So hopefully that there's still some things to work out and there's some details around it, but hopefully it makes it valuable again and gets people, gets past the perception that why even do it.
Yeah. And so as we talk through this, I mean, there's quite a bit. And so I think, again, if we switch gears a little bit and see if I'm gonna come to you, we see the problems arising, on the day-to-day. And I think in this next section, you kind of talk through what we're seeing on the ground. So I'm gonna hand this over to you as we talk through some of these numbers.
So thanks, Frank. Yeah, I think we're pivoting here, and this is what we're going to talk about for the rest of the time today is a new concept that's gathering some traction in the industry. This concept called beyond compliance. But I think you're seeing the enforcement crackdowns, but there's also a lot of investment going on in safety. And part of the challenge we have here, as you can see by this slide, since 2010, we still have now certainly those carriers that are on here. Some of you may be making good strides, and I hope that's the case. But as an industry generally, we still have the numbers that have escalated fatalities for quite some time, for that, like essentially the last 15 years. They've come down a little bit the last couple of years, but we still have some challenges, and in terms of fatalities out on the highways. Go ahead, Frank. I think we've been working hard, both in industry and government, to try and affect these changes here, but we're still not making measurable, impacts. And I think there's still many in industry that believe if I comply with the rules, I'm going to be safe, and that's not the case always. The regulations are minimum. And I think a lot of folks are just trying to meet the minimum, and that's in many cases not working. And when we look at, broadly how we're measuring progress, we still measure in many cases are measuring based upon past performance, right? Lagging indicators versus, what, the latest technology and management practices can do. And really at the end of the day, enforcement, they can't manage the entire industry. There's 13,000 roadside inspectors. We have over 750,000 carriers. So it's just, it's a whack-a-mole. And so I think there's a lot of progress being made, but it really, at the end of the day, it's not just government that can address this, it's government and industry. Go ahead, Frank.
Yep.
And so part of this, the shift in thinking, I think, is where a lot of carriers are starting to make some progress, and I suspect some of you on the call today are doing this, is making that leap from certainly understanding compliance. That's what the rules say. That's what we have to do. Government really is managing this, but the rules don't change very often, and they take a long time. And it's really an after the fact action that helps to compel changes. Whereas on the safety side, it's really it can be very more proactive, where the company's in control. You have the ability to affect change more quickly. Insurers are paying every passing day, they're paying more attention to this, and they help advance and look at this. And the reality is liability has become a big problem for the last couple of years, particularly with nuclear verdicts. And so,
Oh yeah.
So it really, this is kind of the next wave of where we're moving to beyond what the rules are doing.
And Steve, I think we're past nuclear. I think we're in the thermonuclear verdicts, to be honest with you.
We are. Those went up. There were 81 of them last year. That thermonuclear verdict, for those of you who don't know, that's over 100 million case. Yeah. So it's crazy. So next thing. It's sticking on that liability question. I think it really is changing the dynamics, both particularly on the insurance side. And I think, we're seeing more and more, fortunately on the road, in the news, we see a lot of these bad crashes, and that's in people's minds, the general public. And so that's challenging, with respect to the industry and trying to make progress. But really data is about, there's a lot more information, and evidence, that we have, across the gamut, from driver data to carrier data. And I think that's really changing the dynamic, both on the good side, but on the bad. Right. And so, and that's something we'll talk about here as we go through the rest of the deck. Go ahead. Go ahead, Frank. Yeah, and Einstein here, he was a smart dude, was ahead of his time, but we've been doing many things for many years, similar things, and so it's really about changing the paradigm of how we look at safety and risk, beyond the lens of compliance, and really rethink how we're managing our fleet and managing risk and moving away from, so lagging indicators certainly are important, but really moving towards leading indicators. Go ahead, Frank. So I call this the bell curve of safety. So you've got the fleets are all in on safety. They are all in. They're going to take the latest advancements in technology and management. Those are the ones we don't have to worry about them, right? They're way far ahead of everybody. And then we've got all the ones on the lower end, and that's really where enforcement should be spending their time, right? Focusing on those bad actors, the folks that Scott was talking about, but the large section of the industry is in the middle, right? So they're making decisions every day. Where do I put my resources? Do I spend it on operations because the wheels got to turn, or do I spend it on safety? And so a lot of them are just looking for help. They don't know the best way to approach it. And so that's where we need to spend our time as an industry helping those fleets that are in the middle, making those decisions to make the right investment decisions, to move them towards the front end of the curve, and that will shift everybody to the right, and then it'll shine more of a spotlight on those on the bottom end of the curve, which we really need to get out of the business.
And Steve, I mean, wouldn't you agree? I mean, the hard part is when you use where I spend my resources operationally is I can spend them on operation stuff that's tangible right now versus I can get to safety tomorrow because it's not as tangible until something happens, and that's the hard part, right?
That's right. It's the reactive versus proactive stance. We're, as an industry, we've been reactive for many years. There's reasons for that, and a lot of it is to your point. But I think we can be, with where we are today, and what we know, we can be a lot more proactive and a lot more quickly than ever before.
That is, especially with the technology we have today. Absolutely.
Yeah. You're exactly right. We'll talk about that.
So let's go into what has changed, right, in this process.
Yeah, so go ahead, Flip. So it's all about data, right? And so I think, to your point, Frank, technology and information is everywhere today. And when you look at the marriage, and kind of the roles between government and industry, there's a lot of common themes. Everyone wants to be safe, most everyone. But I think everyone wants to be responsible for the most part, except the dark trucking part of the business. There are differences between government and industry. There's different pressures. There's different things you're being measured on. And so really what allows both to thrive is information and data, and leveraging that to your strengths of where you fit, whether you're on the government or the industry side, where you can fit and best manage that data to advance your goals and advance safety. So again, 5 years ago, we are so far ahead of where we were 5 years ago, with information and technology, and measuring that. I think many fleets have all kinds of metrics and dashboards and are measuring things in real time, and have experience now where they just don't think things are safer, they can prove it, right? And so because of this data, all this information, we know as safety people, it's about behavior, right? The rules do certain things, but ultimately safety is about behavior. It's not about the rule book. And I would argue that if we took 2/3 of the rule book away, we would actually improve safety, because we spend so many time on enforcement and industry chasing rules that, not all of them are correlated to risk. And so I think as an industry, we need to move that paradigm. And I think the data allows you to focus in and find root causes, right? It's not just about, well, I think this is what happened. I can actually show why. And it really helps answer the why. And ultimately, this data, as I mentioned earlier, enforcement is limited. So we need to create a mechanism to empower industry, right? And incentivize industry to self-regulate. Because let's be honest, industry knows more than government. Because we're ahead of the government, we're ahead of the regulatory curve, and so we know what works best for our operation. So we need to incentivize that. Government needs to empower the industry to do that. And as we also know in industry, carrots typically work better than sticks. Incentivizing drivers and rewarding good performance is more likely to sustain behavior than slapping a penalty on somebody. And so that's going to incent proper behavior and sustaining that behavior.
I mean, and Steve, I mean, the way we deal with safety versus 12 years ago, 12, 13 years ago, when I first got in this, which was, I'm going to yell at you. I'm going to have a device that yells at you every time you speed, and I'm going to beat you to death. And that wasn't sustainable. So now we're at a point where you kind of have to put the carrot out there. So
That's right, for sure, for sure. Next. All right, let's move into Beyond Compliance, which is a program that's starting to gain some traction. So a little background, I'll try and move through this as quickly as I can, but this concept of Beyond Compliance has been around for a while, almost 20 years now. But there's several. Motor Carrier Safety Advisory Committee looked at this years ago. That's kind of chartered by FMCSA to look at alternative incentives that can help promote safety beyond just regulations. American Transportation Research Institute did some research again about 15 years ago looking at this topic. And more recently, Congress has got into the game, and there's actually statutory language that Congress has directed FMCSA to develop a beyond compliance program. Really, it's about incentivizing safe performance. Next. Transportation Research Board also looked at this quite some time ago, not too long after CSA was launched. And they looked at it and they said, even with CSA having more data and more kind of the prioritization tool, it's going to help government target actors based on compliance. Compliance challenges, it still is not going to do the job. We still have a long way to go. And looking at alternative programs beyond just compliance can really yield far better safety impacts in the long run than just expanding enforcement, which the government enforcement regime will never be able to keep pace. And so they looked at this and made a similar assessment. Next. So let's talk a little bit about where this program is today in progress, and Scott, feel free to jump in. So
Yeah.
CVSA has been looking at this the last couple of years. They did a survey of industry to look at how they view this program and where they see opportunities and where they see things that are needed. And so they had a fairly robust group of carriers.
Yeah.
They did three virtual workshops on this and got some great responses. And I won't read through the numbers there, but clearly they see things like safety critical events, enhancing knowledge, things like that as key to advancing this concept.
And CVSA has been a key player in getting this done, or getting it out there and keeping it moving too.
Yep, for sure. Next. So a couple key themes came out of that work that they did. Ultimately, they believe it can improve safety outcomes. I think I think most in industry feel that while CSA and SMS, has its place there, it has some shortcomings. And so we need to look at alternative ways to help advance the bar for safety. And that's one of the things that came through too. If we do something like this, it has to be available to everybody. We can't segment it to certain companies. Voluntary. Key is making sure we've got validated solutions that are part of this program and there's monitoring going on. Needs to be a joint government and industry effort too, because both stand to benefit, and so both need to be part of it.
And government kind of has to be involved. I mean, that's the incentive there's got to be a piece of that which is they're inspecting you. Where part of the incentive's got to come in that area.
That's a good point, Scott, because if you go back to the bell curve of safety, a lot of carriers don't act until government does something, right?
Yeah.
They won't act on their own. So that was a key part of the work that I think folks feel that there needs to be a government role here because they can help advance that bell curve to the right side of the curve. Right, Frank? So there's some momentum building. I mentioned the congressional directive. There's actually currently Congress is going through the reauthorization process of the highway bill that essentially sets the programs for the next 5 years for the federal DOT and FMCSA. And there is in the House side of that bill, there is a provision directing the agency to develop a rulemaking in 2 years. As we've talked about, CVSA is really taken this on and has been leading an effort, but a number of folks are also, a number of associations, we'll talk about that in a minute. They essentially have requested FMCSA to do a pilot program on this concept. They submitted that letter in 2024, actually. And there's been some additional value-added products in terms of, not products in the true sense of the word, but additional knowledge enhancement now that we know more. So the Alberta Motor Truck Association has released a book looking at different technologies and management practices, and American Transportation Research Institute had just started a new research project on beyond compliance to look at it.
And that AMTA book is, it's got a good information there.
Yeah, it's very useful. You haven't seen it. Go ahead. So these are the associations and organizations that have essentially submitted letters to FMCSA supporting a pilot request. So 18 of them. And it really runs the gamut across the industry. I won't read them all off. You can see them there, but from industry to brokers to safety groups to the bus folks. And so there's a broad chorus, if you will, of people wanting to advance this pilot project forward.
And it's been good to see them coming in and adding another one, and everybody officially, joining the effort.
Yes, for sure.
Supporting.
Yeah, there's a lot of support for this, and as we've defined how this is impactful and the problem at hand, I think it's relevant. I think a lot of people are asking, well, what is the solution? And so let's talk about it. So let's talk about where do we see solutions arising from this?
So that's a good question, and thank you, Frank. You can go ahead and advance. So a couple things. Number one, we have to reward performance, and that's proven performance and evidence-based. So I think we can do that now much more than ever, right? So we've got all kinds of technology and data and information where we can evaluate performance and improve it. Looking at leading indicators, again, moving towards prevention, being more proactive, looking at critical events, things before a crash happens or before a roadside inspection happens. We know that those near miss data, crashes are rare events. There's lots of things that happen that don't result in a crash. And so we have the ability to collect and evaluate and analyze that data now. And we should be. If we're not, we need to be. And so a lot of solutions and technologies today allow us to do that, right? And we've got to reward. We have to recognize, and it has to be meaningful, right? So the reward and the recognition, and not just to the government, but also to insurance companies, to customers. A lot of customers are asking, what are you doing to improve safety? Much more so than ever in the past. And a lot of that's due to the litigation that's going on in today. And so best practices beyond just technology, it's what you do with the information and how you build that into coaching and training programs and sharing awareness about good practices that are happening. Yeah, I think the other thing that's where the program's trying to do too is we have a very different demographic in the workforce today with young people. They're much more technology savvy than ever. And so as an industry, we should leverage that, right? Let's get them involved because they can use their skills to help those of us that have some gray hair like myself be a little bit better, and create and introduce new ideas and do all the work and so it help promote a career path.
And your point about technology and a younger workforce, drivers, that's something that's a reality in the industry right now. It's like trucks are being upgraded quicker because to get drivers in because of they are tech hungry, and that's a real thing.
You're right. I mean, I know carriers that have hired data scientists, right? I mean, it's just the opportunities I think that this opens up are really impressive.
And to your point, we have more data than we've ever had being gathered, and we are at the peak of some of the best tools predictive analysis and so forth. Yeah, I mean, this is, if there's ever a time, all that's accelerating.
Yeah. Yep. And the reality too, you can go ahead and advance it, Frank, but the reality too, the downside, which I think is something that, we don't like to talk about, but we need to, is, you're investing in a lot of this technology, you have a lot of data, you have a lot of information. You need to manage it, right? Because if you don't, you're opening yourselves up. And so, not just from a liability perspective, but you're not taking full advantage of the tools that can help you. And so I see a lot of carriers that have invested in technology, but they haven't fully deployed it, right? They've put it in their trucks, but they're not managing it effectively or actively. And you're not taking full advantage of that when you do that. And so you need to be intentional, right? You don't just buy it and put it on the truck. You have to have a plan, and work that plan. So two parts of the idea here behind the program, building blocks, are kind of categorizing safety technology elements and safety management practices. So not, certainly technology can help, but also how you manage that technology and manage that data to be more proactive. And so the program's being designed to capture both of those things, because not everything is about tech. There's a lot of good practices and good training models and good coaching models out there. So we need to offer different opportunities of solutions that would be part of the program. And we're trying to coin these terms, HSI and MSI. HSI is human safety intervention, and MSI is machine safety. And you've got active and passive. So there's different types of technologies that can help take control of the vehicle, and some that are essentially telling the driver, this has happened, you need to take action. So different ways, different types of technologies to activate behavioral change to make that change. Go ahead, Frank. So this is an eye chart. One of the things when you talk about this with people, I call it the Christmas tree effect. Everyone's got the best idea to solve different aspects of safety and technology. Everyone has their own ornament they want to hang on the tree, but a big part of this program, going back to the CVSA survey, is how do we validate things? What's in and what's out. And so a big part of the next wave of this program is going to be, okay, let's figure out what's in and what's out. And so there's going to be that's going to be part of the ATRI project. The book that AMTA put out has a lot of great material, as Scott mentioned, in it that can help in this regard. Go ahead, Frank. So this is a little bit on the publication we talked about, and one of the things it does is try and create a taxonomy, because when you talk to people about particularly when it comes to technology, you've got different nomenclature for things, right? So part of it is we need to, as an industry, to come together and say, okay, this is what this thing is and does, and have a standard for that. And I think it's not just about putting the technology to put it on, but it's also actively manage it. I was talking to a company about this a couple of months ago. They looked at their camera company, and they looked at 5,000 of their customers over the course of a year, and carriers that actively coached their drivers on the results from the cameras had a 22% crash difference from those who didn't actively coach. So huge difference. So that's the kind of thing that we really want to move towards, that proactive posture.
Which I've heard the saying before, and people dispute whether it's true or not. Is there's this discussion, the whole thing about having technology, having the tools, and not using them is worse than not having it all.
Yeah, it depends who you talk to about that. I think,
I was curious what your thought on that was.
Yeah, I've talked to, obviously I'm not a lawyer, but I know a lot of them working for the law, or as a subsidiary of the Scopelitis law firm. I think, you talk to the litigators, they'll tell you they would much rather defend a carrier in court that has made the commitment and has the culture. Maybe they've made a few mistakes, but they've taken the onus and put their money where their mouth is and invested in this. maybe they made a few mistakes, but they would much rather defend that carrier than a carrier that hasn't done any of this stuff.
Oh
So
yeah,
it can, there's a higher likelihood of success.
Yeah.
So, and I think to that point, what we tell carrier clients all the time is, leverage your vendors. They're there to help you, right? They can help you understand the system. They can help you train. They can train you on it to take full advantage, because many of them don't. They don't take that
Yeah.
opportunity to do that. And I think it's a partnership. I'm sure you guys see this with your customers all the time. It's a partnership, and as a carrier, lean on your vendors. They can they can really help you and get the full advantage of the technology.
100%.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Go ahead. So the current framework here is with this is putting carriers in tiers, right? And so depending on where you are in your compliance and safety journey, I think going back to the bell curve, some folks just don't know they need some direction and a pathway. So it's the current thinking here is we'll have 3 tiers of carriers depending on where you are in your safety and performance journey relating to the Beyond Compliance program. And so the tier 1 carriers there'd be a standard set. They meet all those standards. Their performance is acceptable. There'd be criteria. So they would be able to take full advantage of incentives. Tier 2 would be those that are doing some things, but maybe not fully to the tier 1. And so, but they are actively moving in the right direction. And tier 3 would be those that, maybe they've fallen out of favor, but they're still committed. So the idea here is create a pathway for everybody should they choose to participate in the program. Next.
Part of the incentive.
That's right. So, again, I know we're coming up on time here. I'm trying to move through these last ones a couple quickly. So really it's about, you have to start with the baseline compliance, and then at that point it's evidence based. There would be a scoring model that would be applied based upon the different solutions. So the idea here would be there'd be a menu of options, right? We've talked about those solutions that would be validated in the system. There'd be a menu of options that a carrier could select from. Every operation is different, right? So give them the option to pick from the menu that works best within their operational framework. And so it's tailored to them. And that's the difference between safety and compliance. Regulations apply relatively evenly across everybody, whereas we know every fleet's different. So the idea behind this model is let's give the industry recognized, and frankly, we want to applaud that
Yes.
different, right? And so make something that is tailored to their business that's going to help them advance their own needs. And so at the end of the day, get recognized. You prove yourself, you continue that performance, you get recognized through incentives.
One size does not fit all.
For sure. Okay, next. So there's a number of incentives that have been identified as possible incentives, and they've been grouped into different buckets. Financial business, so financial things like beyond compliant carriers could get reduction in MVR pulls, or maybe IRP fees, or so maybe they get tax credits, right? Business, some customers may want to specify in their contracts, I want to use a beyond compliant carrier, right? So there's different things. CSA credits are being contemplated, and ISS score credits. So lots of different incentives that are being talked about right now that the ATRI research is going to look at to try and talk to the industry and say, okay, what things are most important to you as a carrier from an incentive standpoint? Go ahead, Frank. So I call this a ladder of safety. And I think the 5 C's, as you move up the ladder, you improve performance, you improve safety. And most carriers are probably somewhere in the middle between consistency and capability. But ultimately, you start at the baseline, and safety is a lot about habit forming and doing things the right way every time and consistently, making sure that you have the capability within your fleet to perform when you need to. And ultimately, safety is about culture and and throughout the organization, and then continuous improvement. So I'm sure all of you on the line can kind of where you fit in the ladder of safety. Hopefully you're at the higher end of the ladder. But if not, the hope with Beyond Compliance, should it become reality, is going to help you get there. Next.
And it's not about if it becomes, it's just a matter of when, right?
That's the plan.
Yes.
So, I think almost finished up here. So really, as I mentioned earlier, there, that we can now create an objective way to evaluate this. We can, the idea here is when you hear, you talk to people about safety culture, it's like, well, I know it when I see it. But the reality here is with this program, we're trying to create an objective way to actually show that, right? And so, and not just looking backward, but looking forward and leaning into leading indicators and all the things that I think as successful fleets will tell you, we know this works, and we live it every day. And so I think, and it's not just, because it's the right thing to do, we need to incentivize that and recognize that, because right now it's all about sticks, but we need to move more towards carrots. Go ahead. So, I think because of the environment we're operating in today, I think we've talked about a lot of this through the presentation. This is the bottom line. It's time to act on this. I think the industry's ready for it. I think the supplier community is ready to give them what they need to get us there. And we just need to get on the bandwagon and really advance it, because the government's never going to be able to get us there. God bless them. They're doing the best job that they can, but it's really a partnership. And I think we need to empower industry to help move the ball. Okay, Frank?
Exactly right. So it looks like we've reached the end of the core of our presentation, and we already have a few questions that have come in. So if it's all right with you gentlemen, I'm going to hop straight into the questions. And so it looks like we've got the first one that talks about, in regards to ELP, English Language Proficiency, for H2A or H2B visa drivers from Mexico and Canada, seasonal drivers for sugarcane harvest season, what about AG exemption? So there's a lot of questions about how that's applying in a variety of circumstances.
As it stands today, if you're regulated, you're under our service regulations, the ELP will apply. The only exemption today is if you're operating in the southern border zone. The idea is that if you're driving a commercial motor vehicle in the U.S., that you have to meet the ELP requirements.
The driver qualification requirements still apply.
Yep.
It looks like we have another question about, in regards to those tiers, Steve, that you were just talking through. What is the source for setting the criteria for tiers, and what current results will move the bar as results improve across the board for a given company?
So that's part of the work that ATRI's getting ready to undertake, is to identify sources of data, sources to essentially validate what should be in the program. Cameras, as an example, I suspect they'll be in there, but looking at research, third-party research, and other validated research to say, okay, these are the benefits from these types of solutions, they should be in the program. And so part of the idea behind the program, assuming it's operationalized, is there would be data that the carriers would have to produce on a periodic basis on their performance. And so that data would be evaluated on an ongoing basis, to ensure that the carriers aren't just installing the technology and not reporting or not gathering data, right? You've got to validate that they're continuing to use it and they're getting results from that work. So part of the program would be a program to ingest all that information. The current thinking is there would be a third party that would kind of sit in the middle and administer all this with the carriers, and they would interface with FMCSA as needed to pull in compliance related data to essentially run the model that would be part of the program.
Some
Yeah, I don't see any chance that cameras won't be in there. I mean, at this
Yeah.
point, we already know what the value of them are.
For sure. Yeah. And that's what I referenced. There's some that may be on the Mendoza line, as I like to call it, for those of you that are baseball fans. And part of that is, yeah, I think it tries to limit the goal is to have evidence-based solutions that we can document, have a safety improvement, because we don't want to, if the Christmas tree has too many ornaments on it, it'll fall over.
Absolutely. And so we have another question about smaller carriers that maybe they can't afford some of that new technology or data scientists. With a specific example of, with 7 trucks, a person reviewing ELD data, but they're also responsible for running the company. Um, and to that, even I will reply, this is where us as a vendor want to help you, and setting up specific reports that can help you decipher some of that ELD data without taking extensive timing. And that's where I can speak for TransFlow. We provide a plethora of reporting that should help cut that time out and make that review process much easier. But I also want to turn this over to Scott and Steve for their input as well.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I get it a lot from small carriers and owner operators. You're right. They a lot of times
Yeah.
they're getting trucks in the secondary market, and that's where the safety management practices come into play, where you don't necessarily have to have a big budget. For example, a good driver training program, right? Documented training program. If you have a fatigue management program, as an example, where you're measuring. So that's where as I mentioned earlier, the whole cafeteria, the menu style approach, and also the scoring model. The current thinking is it's going to be bucketed based upon one of the things that is going to be part of the model is size, because we know large carriers are very different than smaller carriers. So you cannot compare them. So there's a very good acknowledgement of that by the folks that are kind of working on all of this stuff. And that comes up every time we talk to FMCSA about it. And so that's why, everyone, the idea here is that every carrier, it doesn't matter whether you're an owner operator or a carrier with 25,000 trucks, we want to provide an opportunity to have everyone participate if they wish.
I know we're a few minutes over. I think we have time for one more question, but as a quick reminder, a recording will be available within the next 24 hours for those that have either registered or participated in today's session. And then, so it looks like the final question that we have time for is, are there any plans for walking back the non-domicile ruling that would allow safe, compliant, and reputable drivers to retain their CDLs? Do we foresee that as an option?
I think that would probably be something that might come up in the beyond compliance program. But as of right now, I mean, it's in effect, and the courts have upheld it. I don't think there's right now any opening where they're going to roll that back. I mean, there's things in litigation. We'll see how that plays out, but
Yeah,
long term.
Yeah, I think that might be. We'll see. The Scott said the litigation. There is a petition for a request for an exemption that is sitting at FMCSA right now for drivers that are DACA recipients that have.
Yeah.
One of the challenges I think that has been through this process, one of the issues FMCSA has argued for, I think makes sense through this, is we have no history on many of these drivers, no driving history, and so the interesting thing to watch with this exemption request that has been thrown forward is you have a DACA recipient driver that has been in the country for many years and has driving history. So it'll be interesting to see how they rule on that. But I think the larger question, I don't see this being walked back.
Yeah.
I think there's the momentum is, and the larger issue at play here is the states are under fire too because of the way they're administering the CDL program. There's litigation going on there as well. And so the latest, yeah, a bunch of like 20 some states just sued Secretary Duffy because of providing data. So there's a lot of things swirling on this right now. Probably more than the questioner wanted to know, but yeah, I don't see that being changing anytime soon.
it's the same type of contention with the ELP issue between the states and the federal government, right? There was the back and forth and how we're going to deal with it and who has a right to deal with it. Yeah. So.
And thank you, gentlemen. And thank you for everyone participating today. So before we wrap up completely, Steve, I just want to give you an opportunity. How can people get in touch with you or your team if they have additional questions?
You can go to our website. Thank you, Frank, scopoleadesconsulting.com. You can reach out to me. My email address is skepler@scopoleadesconsulting.com, or my phone number, 202-728-2852. And I'd love to talk to anyone who wants some help or just wants to chat. Thank you.
Awesome. And then for our side, any questions regarding us, the Transflow team, contact@transflow.com, best email address to use to get in touch with us. It'll send out a mass email to all of us, and one of us will get in touch with you. Promise that. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. See you.
All right. Take care.